I'm Fred Wilkinson, Managing Editor of the National Provisioner. I'm speaking with Anne Marie Roerink. She is with 210 Analytics. And uh, Anne Marie, thank you for joining me today. Could you tell us a little bit about 210 Analytics and your role there?
Yeah, sure thing. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I always love talking about meat and poultry. So, without a doubt, we'll have a lot to chat about that. But 210 Analytics is a company I started about 13 years ago. I have a big passion for research and a big passion for research in the food industry. I think it's just always so interesting to see what people say, why a certain new trend emerged, or what is really driving the numbers that we see coming out of the IRI and Nielsen's of this world. And my passion really translated into starting my own company, and it's been a fantastic ride ever since.
Well, Anne Marie, I know recently the Power of Meat 2022 report was released and had contained a lot of information, of course, and uh, quite a bit of it favorable for trends in the meat category. Um, One of the interesting findings that stood out to me was that although consumer trips to the meat department were down, their spending was up. From your research, do you see this trend continuing?
Yeah, so that's something that IRI looks at very closely every week, every month, and it's something that we've been keeping an eye on as well. So I think we have to go back to what happened early on in the pandemic, because we have to keep in mind that the trends that we are seeing today are really related to three different areas. It's like, how well did you do in 2020, which means the better you did, the harder continued growth becomes. Then, of course, the level of inflation, also the ability of their industry to actually meet the demand that comes out of retail. If we look at the order fill rates right now, they are pretty miserable across many different areas of the store, including meat. And then, of course, that consumer engagement that we always have been looking at. And that's where the trips come in, as you talked about. And what we saw in 2020 is that consumers really started to integrate a trip to the meat aisle while they were in the store, much more so than we've ever seen, because so many meals moved to the home. So what we're looking at is, year over year, sure, we're down, but when you actually look to pre-pandemic, you see that people still are buying meat more often than they did in 2019. So a little bit of a good news, bad news scenario. But I think more than anything, relative to looking forward a little bit, people have started to realize that they can buy bulk packages, freeze and use them over time. Especially more stores are talking about the fact that they have vacuum packaging that is freezer ready. They're educating consumers about that. Other brands are providing individually wrapped portions within a larger bag. Those are ready to go into the freezer. Others just create their own with all their equipment they now have at home. So I think the whole idea of going to the store less often, but buying more while they're there has become quite popular, and of course has set off some light bulbs among some of the consumers as well. When there's a good special, when there's bulk prices to be had. And as we are in an environment of extremely high inflation, I think that trip pressure, but higher baskets might continue for a while.
And speaking about the current retail economic climate with supply chain issues, with not just with the product that consumers buy itself, but also components that go into packaging, everything else that goes into getting the product on the shelf. If I remember correctly, part of the Power of Meat survey said that consumers are continuing to show a preference for convenience items, value-added packaging. How does that play out given, again, the increasing inflationary price pressures for across the retail grocery space?
Yeah, there's really many contradictory movements happening right now. Let me start by saying that consumers are ultra aware of the inflation. I think it's reached levels and it's reached a breadth of categories where people just, regardless of how much you're focused on money saving measures, people are noticing it. And so our IRI tracks this every single month in their consumer study. And every single month we see that just tick up a little bit more. So the latest wave in February noted that 92% of consumers have noted that prices are somewhat or a lot more expensive across the grocery store. And of that 92%, 95% are worried about it. Well, initially, when you're worried, you might not take a whole lot of steps. You might think it's temporary. But if this continued and if you only see it get worse, that's really when we're starting to see a lot of consumers make changes. Now, during a typical environment like this, what we see is the first step people do is eating out a little bit less often at restaurants. But if you think about the pandemic environment, we were already eating at restaurants less than we did prior to the pandemic. So that really wasn't the exact savings that people had gotten used to. So then you see people looking to say, okay, well, I want these and these and these meats. What store does it have on sale? Or then you see the next step of people saying, well, let's just buy what is on sale and I'll figure it out afterwards. So there's all these different things that people are doing. And if you look at the studies of old, if you look at the old pattern in which people would attack all these money saving measures, because there was a very specific way in which people did it. And the very, very last one was buying less. So I'll just buy less and I'll stretch it and I'll make it work. That already is one of the main measures that people are taking today in produce, in meat, in all the different categories. And that's really where some of that volume pressure comes from as well. So it's really people are attacking it from every which way, and certainly looking at, do I just marinate it myself, or do I buy a cut that is a little bit cheaper? And I now go on Pinterest to see how do I create this, buy this cut, but still have a really good eating experience. So there is a lot of creativity in what people are doing in order to still make their budgets meet at the end of the month.